I'm the arresting officer from San Francisco Del Rincon Police Station.
I'm Almaguer. I'm going to be the anchor for the segment, and I'm also the editor and director.
I am Giselle Ibarra,
And I'm Jocelyn Smith.
and we are from the psychology department.
Good afternoon, this is Pacific University. I'm your anchor, Alex Almaguer, coming to you live with Zoo Media. Today we have a heartbreaking story of two female serial killers that committed a bunch of felony murders. We're going to go into this news story shortly after with our arresting officer and our panelists. With that said, local law enforcement just released a description of the two sisters located in Mexico, age 56 Delfina Gonzalez and age 39 Maria Gonzalez, both sisters that ran this elaborate human trafficking business. Local law enforcement just gave us a description of both of the offenders, as well as our arresting officer is on set and is gonna answer some questions with our panelists about the arrest that took place on January 14th, 1964 in the state of Mexico. The description of the sisters, both of them with black hair, darker eyes, small petite build, one in her mid-50s, the other one in her high 30s. Both were born in Jalisco, Mexico. That can be seen on this map. Jalisco, Mexico is right here. They later relocated to Guanajuato, Mexico, and that's where most of their crime and was taking place. They had this whole operation moved originally from where they originated, and our arresting officer that was on scene is going to give us more facts about the case. Joining me, my co-anchor today, is going to be our arresting officer that was on scene, Officer Abby. So tonight she's going to be joining us and answering some further questions about the crime, the investigation, just some other details that are exclusive to this crime. So Officer Abby, can you just walk us through kind of how you guys were able to determine where these victims were and kind of what the crime was and who the perpetrators were?
Yeah, so one of the sisters' victims actually ended up escaping from the house, and she ended up reaching out to our department, which led us to getting a search warrant for their arrest.
What were sort of the findings that you guys were able to uncover? Was there any bodies left on scene or any remains that you guys were able to, take back for, further investigation?
Yeah, so we ended up finding the bodies of 80 women, 11 men, and some fetuses. It was actually a pretty bloody and horrific scene. Some of the methods that were used were beating, they were starved, or even drugged.
Yeah, so this case, obviously there's a lot of people that have been impacted, but when you guys got to the case with your team, was there any witnesses or anybody that came forward that was able to provide you guys with valuable information about the case or even about the victims? Was even their families? Has anybody talked about it specifically? Would you like to share that?
Yeah, so the witnesses were actually the other victims in the sisters' household. They were held there under their will. They were kidnapped and taken back to the place to do sex trafficking or anything that the sisters wanted them to do.
So this whole operation, it was a big, enterprise that they were running. Therefore, the question that comes to mind is, how did they get this amount of victims? This wasn't just 1 or 5 or 10 victims. This was in the close to the hundreds. So can you talk about how they were able to lure them, or just was this kind of just an operation run by both sisters, or were the victims just voluntarily going on their own free will? Can you just touch on that?
Yeah, so they would end up luring in their victims by telling them false information, specifically about jobs. So they would tell them, oh, you could be a housemaid and earn a lot more money for your family, and they would believe that, and so they were willing to drop everything and go do that to provide for their families, because a lot of them would be from low income or poverty families, and they wanted to do whatever they could to support their families. But in reality, when they would go to their house, it would be a whole sex trafficking scheme, and they would be tortured and abused by the sisters.
Yeah, and this totally makes sense, just going back to the poverty factor. A lot of human trafficking rings that are created, it's that factor that people are just so vulnerable and just kind of don't understand or are able to tell what the red flags are. Therefore, it makes them so vulnerable that these opportunities and just jobs that they obviously don't have access to in their small low income communities, and then these two big personalities that come to their towns and start advertising all these jobs. So those vulnerabilities that we just talked about, going off the point of being low income and poverty and all that, why do you think this whole scheme went unnoticed for so long?
I feel like they were able to go unnoticed for so long for multiple factors. One being the victims themselves. Since they came from low income, smaller cities, they were probably nervous to speak up, or, well, they honestly didn't even really have the opportunity to go out of the brothel that they were in. And just the second key factor going into that was the people that would pay for their services were people of authority, like law enforcement, military,
Wow.
people in political power. So it was really hard for them to speak up or go against people like that. I mean, put yourself in their shoes of being low income, trying to make money for your family, but then realizing that it's a whole sex trafficking scheme. So yeah, there was a lot of corruptions, and where the location was in itself, it was also in a smaller city, which made it even harder to be caught. So that made it even less of a possibility for them to get out or get help.
So lack of law enforcement surrounding and just kind of being aware, just being present, just it makes it easier for the perpetrators to just kind of run whatever schemes they want, and then just not like you said, they're low income, and if they have no one to go to, and those people that they want to go to, which is the police, are corrupted themselves and are the people that they are seeing while they're getting trafficked. Yeah, that's very mind-boggling.
Yeah, absolutely horrible.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for joining us and just kind of giving us a description and the details about the case. This whole enterprise that they're running is crazy to just kind of think about. However, we do have our two panelists that are going to be joining us with us in our next segment. So stay tuned for this next interview.
Hi, my name is Giselle Ibarra,
And my name is Jocelyn Smith, and we're from the psychology department.
and we're going to talk about from a sociological perspective.
So when we're looking into the sisters' childhood, we see that their father was very abusive and controlling, and he was also a police officer for their city. And so because of that, he abused his power, and he would lock his daughters into the cells to try and teach them a lesson whenever they did something bad. Along with that, he also made them watch as he tortured people that he had arrested.
Looking into the sisters' personalities, we know that they didn't have any medical conditions, no psychological conditions, or any drug usage that we know of. But we do know that they show no remorse towards their victims because they would starve them and they would drug them. However, we do know that they came from a dysfunctional family. Both parents installed fear in them, specifically their mother mentally put fear with her cult-like type of worship. And then the father was an alcoholic and sexist who used his power as a sheriff to abuse them, which she mentioned earlier. And also, just growing up, they feared of poverty, which caused them to cause these criminal behaviors.
So one theory that I believe was a factor to their crimes was the strain theory. The strain theory is the idea that people commit crimes based on situations they're put in that cause a lot of stress on them. Since they left their family, who was very abusive, they lost their main source of income. And because of that, they tried to make their own salon to try to bring money in for themselves. But when that wasn't working the way they wanted to, they turned to prostitution themselves, which was their first crime. And then from there, their crimes escalated into bringing other women into their houses to commit the crimes for them, which eventually turned into murdering them. Since they needed money, that was their stressor, and that caused them to commit their crimes.
A second theory that I was able to look into more of their adulthood was the routine activity theory. And it's because they had the three factors that applied to it. And one of them is the motivated offender, and they were motivated because they needed money due to the poverty that they were growing up and even into their adulthood. And the second one was vulnerable victims. These victims were young women in poor cities that also needed money and just wanted a quick, easy job. The last factor is the lack of guardianship, and this was because they had hardly any police due to this was smaller cities, and also because these cities had corrupt police as well.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. Just one last question for you guys as a panelist. What verdict do you guys think should be the outcome of this case? A lot of perspectives come into play, and I'm glad that we have 3 different ones. So what kind of form of punishment would you guys suggest would be best fitting for this crime?
Okay, so the verdict that I would give if I was a judge, I would give first-degree murder, just because this was premeditated, it was planned. They knew their victims that they were going out, and they knew what type of business and how they were going to kill their victims as well.
Punishment that I feel would best suit the verdict would be life in prison. These women took over 90 people's lives, and so they deserve to be put away for the rest of their lives as well.
Yeah, I would agree with both of the psychologists. It was a very severe case with killing of many people, specifically women, and so I feel like that does deserve a harsh punishment, like life or death in prison. And it was a first-degree murder, so it was premeditated, and there's a lot of thought that went into these crimes.
Well, that concludes Zoom Media for you guys. Thank you so much for tapping into our segment. We have Abby, Giselle, Jocelyn, and myself, Alex, covering the story tonight. For further details and the description, you guys can follow the website of Zoom Media. That concludes our whole segment, so thank you so much for watching. We will come back to you guys with another segment very soon.